That autumn evening had the kind of quiet grandeur only Manhattan could conjure. The ballroom at the Whitmore Design Gala shimmered under a canopy of chandeliers, the air thick with designer fragrance, expensive ambition, and well-rehearsed applause. At the center of it all stood Noah Whitmore, 44, the celebrated architect behind Whitmore Atelier, the visionary firm responsible for reshaping city skylines around the world. He had just stepped down from the stage after delivering a speech that was equal parts humble and magnetic. $8 million raised for urban youth housing, a resounding success. Cameras flashed, donors clapped, and Noah, always so composed with his salt and pepper hair and slate blue suit, nodded with the same effortless grace he used to design buildings that took your breath away. At his side walked Sienna Blake, his wife of 10 years, herself a fixture of the fashion world. Dressed in a pearl gold evening gown and diamond cuffs, she looked like she'd stepped out of a luxury editorial. "You were incredible tonight," she whispered, her voice silky, touched by the faintest trace of California cool. Her hand grazed his forearm like a prop for appearances, not affection. Noah smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He hadn't felt at home in that world, or in his own marriage, for a long time. They were polished, yes, perfect, on paper, but hollow beneath the surface. As they exited to a waiting town car, Noah paused to shake hands with patrons and old friends. His laughter, his charm, his elegance, it was all there. And yet, as he helped Sienna into the black Aston Martin and caught a familiar whiff of her French perfume, something inside him stirred. Not love, memory. The ghosts of late-night drives, of laughter before silence settled in. Rain began to fall as they drove north toward their Upper East Side townhouse. The droplets hit the windshield like whispers, soft, then steady. Sienna was scrolling through her phone, her brows furrowed with curated concern. "Vivian's asking if we'll be at the Fashion Foundation's weekend in Montauk," she murmured, still not looking at him. Noah didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the darkened road ahead, slick with rain and reflection. "I was thinking," he said, his voice almost tentative, "maybe we could finally go to Porto." Sienna blinked. "Porto? You always wanted to see the tiled cathedrals and ocean cliffs." She sighed almost inaudibly. "The fall show's in Milan, Noah. I don't think I'll have time." He nodded slowly. He was used to the silence between them now. What hurt more than the words was the knowing. They had stopped choosing each other a long time ago. They were just 3 blocks from home when it happened. Noah's hands were relaxed on the steering wheel, the low hum of jazz drifting from the speakers. The conversation had dried up minutes ago. Outside, rain glistened under streetlights, turning the city into a watercolor of motion and memory. Then out of nowhere, a flash of movement. A small terrier, soaked and trembling, bolted into the street from between 2 parked cars. "Stop the car!" Sienna screamed, her voice cracking, raw with sudden fear. Noah reacted instantly. His instincts, sharp from decades of architectural precision, kicked in. He swerved hard, tires shrieking against the wet pavement. For a second, he saw the dog make it safely to the curb. Relief was just beginning to form when a blinding light struck from the left. A delivery truck. The impact came like thunder. Metal on metal, glass exploding inward, the sound of a world cracking apart. The car spun, then slammed to a stop against a lamppost. And then, darkness. The kind of darkness that doesn't blink or fade. The kind that swallows time. When Noah opened his eyes, everything was too white, too sterile. Hospital light. He tried to move and couldn't. A calm but firm voice spoke beside him. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm Dr. Caroline Jung from neurology. We performed emergency spinal surgery to stabilize your vertebrae." Noah blinked, trying to process the words. The doctor paused, searching his face. "You sustained a spinal cord injury at the T9-T10 level. she said gently. There is paralysis below the waist. At this point, it may be permanent. Permanent. The word carved through him colder than the scalpel that saved his life. His body, once the source of his confidence, his control, his identity, was now a shell. The man who had run along ocean cliffs in Portugal, who sketched buildings while pacing rooftops barefoot, now couldn't feel the blanket resting on his legs. The days that followed were lost in a haze of painkillers, whispered diagnoses, and the mechanical murmur of machines. But even worse than the physical agony was Sienna's absence. Or rather, her presence without presence. She came, yes, but she didn't sit beside him, didn't touch his hand, didn't kiss his forehead. She stood by the door like a PR consultant managing damage control. I've already contacted the interior designer, she said one afternoon, flipping through swatches on her phone. They'll install ramps and widen the doorway. The contractor starts next week. It wasn't cruel. It was cold, efficient, like he was a renovation project, not her husband. Noah stared at the ceiling after she left, eyes burning with questions no one answered. He wasn't just grieving his legs. He was grieving the version of his life he thought was real. The man he had been had died in that car too. 2 weeks into his stay at the rehabilitation center, Noah asked to see her, alone. They met in the garden, where brittle autumn leaves rustled under the wheels of his chair. The sun was soft that day, filtered through thinning branches, but the air between them was taut, stretched with unspoken things. Sienna arrived in a tailored coat in heels far too high for grass. She looked like she had stepped out of an editorial shoot, flawless, composed, untouchable. But there was a hesitation in her stride, a flicker of guilt maybe, or annoyance at having to come at all. What's happening to us, Sienna? Noah asked, voice low but steady. Where did we go? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted, anywhere but at him. Finally, she exhaled. Everything's changed, she said. I'm trying to understand what life looks like now. In sickness and in health, he reminded her, his voice tightening. Don't do that, she snapped, and for the first time, something real cracked through the mask. Don't make me the villain in this. And what would you call it? Noah asked, hands clenched on the armrests. You've barely touched me since the crash. I didn't choose this, she said sharply. And you think I did? Silence surged between them. Sienna began pacing, her heels sinking into the soft earth. When she turned to face him, her eyes shimmered, but not from love, from discomfort, from truth. I'm not a nurse, Noah, she said. I'm not a caregiver. I still want to live, to dance, to feel like I matter somewhere, anywhere. She reached into her purse, and when her hand came out, she was holding something small and cold, her wedding ring. She placed it gently into his open palm. The diamond glinted in the late afternoon light, cruelly beautiful. There's someone else, isn't there? He asked, voice no more than a whisper. She paused. Her silence said more than any confession. Who? He pushed. Finally, she spoke. Jason Trent, his media director, a man Noah had mentored, trusted, welcomed into his home. It started 6 months ago, she added, as if that somehow softened the blow. Noah closed his eyes. Not just betrayal, but strategy. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It had been a plan. I want a divorce, she said, regaining her composure. I've already spoken to my attorney. Of course you have, Noah said flatly. Why reconcile when you can walk away with half? I just want what I'm entitled to. Then talk to Tom, he said coldly. I have nothing more to give you. Sienna turned without another word. A week later, divorce papers arrived. Thick, cold, and cruel. She wanted the townhouse, the beach property, half his company shares, and an alimony package that read like a ransom note. The tabloids devoured it. Visionary architect paralyzed, abandoned by wife. And while the world speculated on the scandal, Noah sat in silence, learning how to button his shirt again with one hand. Alone. Noah stopped counting the days. He had lost track somewhere between learning how to operate the chair's braking system and learning how to grieve silently. Each morning started the same way. The slow humiliation of needing help to sit up, a nurse with gentle hands but empty conversation, and a breakfast he rarely touched. The visits had stopped, if you could even call them visits. Sienna hadn't returned since the papers were served. Her name no longer triggered pain, just quiet finality. Even the tabloids had moved on. Everyone had. Everyone, except gravity. Gravity stayed. It pressed against him in ways he couldn't push back. Until one morning, something shifted. The door opened, not brusquely, not with the rushed urgency of medical staff, but with a kind of calm that felt deliberate. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," the voice said. He looked up. "I'm Dr. Maya Bennett. I'll be your new attending physician." She couldn't have been older than 32. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun, her scrub simple, no makeup save for a small pair of pearl earrings. But it wasn't the way she looked that struck him. It was the way she stood. Unapologetic, grounded, present. Noah expected pity. That was the default. The tilt of the head, the softened tone, the discomfort disguised as empathy. But Maya didn't flinch. She approached his bed with quiet confidence, checking the monitors first, then meeting his gaze directly. "What's your current pain level? 1 to 10? She asked, already scanning his chart. 8, Noah replied, "but only in the parts that still bother showing up." He expected her to chuckle awkwardly. Most doctors did. Maya didn't. She only nodded. "Humor is a valid coping strategy, but I'll still need the truth to help you heal." Noah blinked. Not bad. He wasn't used to that kind of response. Measured, respectful, without sugarcoating. She moved with efficiency but without haste, reviewed his medications, adjusted his repositioning schedule, noted swelling near his lower back. Every movement was precise, practiced, but never robotic. "You can tweak whatever you want," Noah muttered. "Not like it changes the ending." Maya paused and set her tablet down. "Mr. Whitmore, Noah, your ending hasn't been written yet, but your recovery, your independence, your quality of life, those aren't abstract. They're shaped by what you do next." He turned his head, lips pressed in a grim line. "So I fight back, win the big symbolic victory, and what? Wheel myself into meetings while my ex-wife spends my company's profits with her new boyfriend?" Still, Maya didn't blink. She didn't retreat. Her voice was quiet but firm. "You fight because it's your life, because there's more ahead of you than behind you, even if it looks different now." Noah stared at her for a long moment. Then something inside him softened. Just slightly. "If you're going to be part of this new reality," he said, his tone dry, "you might as well call me Noah." She smiled, not a grin. Just a gentle curve of the lips, like someone who knew the value of small victories. "Only if you call me Maya." That was the beginning, not of a cure, but of something far more human, a connection, a quiet understanding. The first step towards something neither of them saw coming. The days that followed didn't change overnight, but Noah did. Not in dramatic ways. He still struggled to transfer into his wheelchair. His legs still refused to respond, and nights were still long. But the weight of it all felt just a fraction lighter, because now there was someone who didn't look away. Maya never lingered longer than her duty required, but her presence lingered anyway. She listened, really listened, not just to his pain levels or his sleep cycles, but to the fragments of who he used to be and who he didn't know he might become. One rainy afternoon, she entered his room during a break and found Noah attempting to maneuver himself from the chair to the therapy bench, alone. "May I help?" she asked gently, not stepping forward until he nodded. Almost there, he grunted, sweat beading on his temple. She didn't lift him. Instead, she observed, "Your left arm's throwing your center of gravity. Try pivoting your core toward your right hip." He adjusted. On the next attempt, he made it. Breathless, he looked up at her. "Thanks. You didn't have to stay." "I'm off duty," she said with a small smile. "I stayed because I see potential. Every patient deserves a chance to stand on their own terms." That line stuck with him. Not walk, not recover, just stand on their own terms. Later that week, she brought in shrimp and grits, her grandmother's recipe, still warm in a mason jar. "Is this bribery?" Noah asked with a lifted brow. "Spiritual medicine," she replied, half joking, half serious. They ate quietly. It wasn't a date. It wasn't anything except human. That was what made it matter. She told him about her childhood in Savannah. Porch swings and Sunday choirs. The noise of 5 siblings packed into a 2-bedroom house. Her voice softened when she spoke of her older brother, Marcus. He was a construction foreman, fell from scaffolding, spinal injury like yours, but worse. No surgery could help. "I was in med school when it happened." Noah stayed silent. "I watched the world stop seeing him," she continued. "To them, he was just a burden. But he never gave up. That's when I knew. I didn't want to be the kind of doctor who walks in, writes a prescription, and walks out. I wanted to stay. And stay she did." Their late-night conversations deepened. They spoke of failure, ambition, fear, legacy. Sometimes they didn't speak at all, letting silence speak for them, a different kind of language. Noah had stopped looking at the calendar. He no longer counted days since Sienna left. Now he noticed smaller things. The way Maya tucked a stray curl behind her ear. The way she made space in silence instead of filling it. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was trust. And after everything he'd lost, that was the rarest gift of all. They never spoke of what they were. There were no confessions, no labels, no late-night declarations under the stars. But something had shifted, undeniably. It lived in the way Maya paused at his door, even when she wasn't on shift. It breathed in the way Noah's voice softened when he said her name. One evening, she arrived with 2 mugs of cocoa and a quiet smile. "I figured we deserved a break from inflammation charts and dosage schedules," she said, handing him the warm cup. They sat by the window as snow fell on the hospital garden, blanketing the hedges and benches in soft white. It was still, and in that stillness, something bloomed. "I didn't think I'd feel this again," Noah said softly. Maya looked at him. "Feel what?" "Seen. Not as a patient, not as a broken man, just me." She didn't answer with words. She just placed her hand gently over his. Not romantic, not suggestive, just present. But happiness, even in its quietest form, rarely goes unnoticed or unpunished. A week later, an envelope arrived at Noah's rehab suite, unmarked, unsigned. Inside, a USB drive. He plugged it into his laptop, curious, then still, then cold. The footage was grainy but clear. Him and Maya in his hospital room, sitting by the window, their hands touching. A soft moment, a private one. Across the screen, a single typed message glowed. You could lose your company. She could lose her license, end it, or lose everything. Noah's jaw tightened. There was no mystery to this. Only Sienna would know when to strike, where to strike, and how. Later that night, he showed the footage to Maya. She watched it in silence, her face unreadable. When it ended, she didn't cry. She didn't curse. She just sat very still. If I'm your weakness, Noah, she said finally, her voice level, then I'll step away. No, he reached for her hand. You're not my weakness. You're the only reason I get up in the morning. Even so, the next day, Maya submitted her resignation. "I won't let them use me as a weapon against you," she told him, "or against my license. I watched the world turn its back on my brother when he became just a patient. I won't let that happen to you." Noah didn't argue. He saw it in her eyes. This wasn't fear. It was dignity, a boundary, not a retreat. So, while the hospital processed her exit, he began planning. With the help of Tom Alvarez, his longtime friend and attorney, Noah began tracing access logs, identifying outdated camera ports, and collecting evidence. Sienna had overplayed her hand. What she saw as love turned scandal, Noah now saw as something worth fighting for. This time, he wouldn't just recover, he'd defend what he was building. And he wasn't doing it alone anymore. 10 days after Maya's resignation, the hospital room felt emptier than it had in weeks. Noah still went to therapy, still practiced transfers, still followed the new doctor's orders. But something essential was missing: her presence. Then in the early hours of a freezing Thursday morning, his phone rang. Unknown number, Georgia area code. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something, instinct, dread, or both, made him answer. "Is this Noah Whitmore?" a man asked, voice tight with panic. "This is he. This is Marcus Bennett, Maya's brother. There's been an accident. She was driving back from a friend's wedding. Her car flipped on the I-16 outside Savannah. She's in the ER, still unconscious." The line between Noah's past and present shattered in that moment. He had lived through impact, through sirens, through not knowing. He knew what it meant to wait in that space between breath and finality. Without hesitation, he called Tom, booked the first flight south, and packed what he could manage with help from his nurse. He wasn't walking, but he was going, dragging the weight of fear, memory, and something deeper. The knowledge of what it meant to wait in a hospital for news you're not sure you're ready to hear. The Savannah General ICU was hushed and humming under pre-dawn fluorescence when he arrived. Marcus met him in the hallway, same steady jawline as Maya, but his eyes were hollow. "Spinal surgery went well," he said. "No cord damage, but she hasn't woken up yet." Noah entered the ICU room like it was a church. The lights were low. Maya lay motionless, her face pale against the pillow, a breathing tube keeping rhythm where her voice should have been. Even still, she looked fierce, like a storm paused, not dispersed. Noah sat beside her, took her hand in both of his, and held on. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped, lights blinked. Noah didn't move. He remembered how she'd stood at his bedside for weeks, never asking for thanks, never asking for anything at all. Now it was his turn to stay. At sunrise, her fingers twitched, her eyelids fluttered, and then, slowly, she opened her eyes. "You're awake," he whispered, barely breathing. Her lips parted, dry, soft. "You're really here. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." She winced, then asked, "My back?" "No spinal damage, just vertebrae trauma. You're going to be okay, but you need rest." She nodded faintly, then looked at him again. "I'm sorry I left you," she whispered. He shook his head. "You didn't leave me. You protected me the only way you knew how. Now it's my turn." He didn't leave after a day or two. He moved into Marcus's guest room, helped with meals, sat by Maya's bedside during rehab sessions, drove her to appointments. Each evening they sat on the porch, drinking ginger tea, the Georgia air warm and thick around them. They didn't talk about lawsuits, or scandals, or even the hospital. They just existed, together. And for the first time since the accident, Noah didn't feel like the one who had been saved. He felt like someone who could carry. By the time Maya could sit up in a wheelchair, Noah and Tom had already been working for weeks, quietly, methodically. "This can't just be about revenge," Noah said one evening, as they reviewed camera access logs and chain of custody records at Marcus's kitchen table. She needs to believe she's won, that she broke us. Only then will she make the next move. Tom nodded, ever the strategist. It's not revenge, he replied. It's leverage, and it's justice. The plan was simple in concept, precise in execution. They would stage a public fracture, a fake breakup, in the same hospital garden where everything between Noah and Maya had first begun to feel real. Word would reach Sienna through mutual contacts, and if they were right, she would show up, expecting victory. Instead, she'd walk straight into the truth. On the morning of the meeting, the air was cool and sharp with early spring. Maya sat beside Noah on the garden bench, her hand resting gently in his. She was dressed simply. No makeup, just strength. "You're sure about this?" she asked. He nodded. "Justice doesn't happen on its own. We have to make it happen." At exactly 10:08 a.m., Sienna Blake entered through the garden gate like she owned the sunlight. Silk coat, sharp heels, oversized sunglasses. Every inch the icon she still believed herself to be. When she saw Maya, her lip curled, but she said nothing. "What do you want, Noah?" she asked, arms crossed. "I want you to hear this from me," he said, voice calm but cold. "I choose her, not out of pity, not out of spite, but because I love her." Sienna scoffed. "You think that confession will stop what's coming for her at the medical board?" Noah smiled faintly. "No," he said, "but the illegally recorded surveillance footage from an unauthorized hospital camera just might." Her eyes flickered. "And the lawsuit for invasion of privacy, harassment of a licensed medical professional, and data theft?" Tom added, stepping out from behind the tree line. "That'll speak even louder." Sienna turned to bolt, but it was too late. Two security officers and a uniformed police officer stepped forward. One read the charges aloud. "You set me up," she hissed. "No," Noah said, his voice steady. "You walked in all on your own." Sienna's expression collapsed, the mask shattering. As they placed her in handcuffs, she spat the last of her venom. "You'll pay for this." Noah looked her in the eyes. "I already have." She was led away. The woman who once stood beside him in diamonds now vanished in silence and steel. Maya said nothing, but her hand tightened around his. Later that week, the headlines hit. Fashion icon arrested for hospital espionage and shocking scandal. Architect Noah Whitmore reclaims his life and his voice. Jason Trent resigned within 48 hours. The scandal consumed what little was left of their empire. And as Tom closed the final file, he said simply, "Justice may be slow, but it always arrives." Spring arrived slowly that year, like a child learning to walk, cautious, trembling, but full of promise. It was on one such morning, when the frost had finally let go of the garden beds, that Noah Whitmore wheeled himself into the same garden where he had once faced Sienna, once said goodbye to a life that had betrayed him. But today he wasn't there to confront the past. He was there to meet the future. From the East Wing corridor, Maya Bennett stepped into view. Draped in a soft ivory shawl, she held a small bouquet of white baby's breath. She was still regaining her stride, slow, deliberate, but every step was laced with purpose, with resilience. Marcus, in a tailored navy suit, walked her down the garden path. Tom Alvarez stood beneath the arbor, smiling like a man who had seen too much and was grateful to finally witness something whole. There were no chandeliers, no orchestra, no press releases, just a quiet garden, a handful of souls, and two hearts that had earned this moment the hard way. Noah's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "I won't promise life will be easy, but I promise I won't give up, no matter how hard it gets." Maya took his hand, eyes shimmering. "And I won't promise I'll always be strong, but I promise I'll stand beside you, even on the days when we're both weak." They exchanged two simple silver bands, hand-forged by a local artisan in Vermont, where Noah had grown up sketching houses on the backs of grocery receipts. The rings weren't flashy, They weren't meant to impress, they were meant to endure. And when Tom pronounced them husband and wife, the garden didn't erupt in applause. It simply breathed, as if the earth itself was exhaling in relief. They didn't rush into the next chapter. First came quiet days, unpacking, planting herbs in the windowsill, falling asleep with their fingers still linked. It was in that stillness that the idea was born. Months later, the Whitmore Bennett Institute for Integrated Recovery opened its doors in rural Vermont. Built on the land where Noah's father once grew tomatoes and dreams, the center was more than a rehabilitation facility. It was a haven for those healing from both visible and invisible wounds. Veterans, trauma survivors, patients lost between diagnosis and identity. Maya led the medical team. Noah ran workshops on creative rebuilding, architecture, woodworking, even garden design. Marcus became the strength and community coach, leading weekly resilience circles where no one was fixed, only heard. "We're not here to save anyone," Maya often told new patients. "We're just here to remind you, you still matter, even when the world has forgotten how to see you." And Noah? He no longer looked like the man who once dominated magazine covers. He looked like someone softer, deeper, whole in a way that didn't require standing tall, only showing up fully. The miracle came quietly. One winter morning, as frost curled along the cabin windows and Maya, now 6 months pregnant, curled beside him with a cup of tea, Noah received a call from the neurology lab. "There's a signal," the doctor said, barely containing her own disbelief. "Below the injury site. We can't guarantee anything, but there's potential." Noah didn't respond right away. He just looked at Maya, who had already heard everything in his eyes. She nodded once, slow and sure. "Then let's go all in." And so began a new kind of training. It was brutal, unforgiving, his shirt often soaked through before the hour was up. There were days his arms shook from strain, days he collapsed onto the mat in silent frustration. But now he wasn't doing it alone. Maya sat beside him through every session, hands resting gently on her belly, eyes never leaving his. She brought snacks, books, music, silence, whatever the moment called for. And when he thought he couldn't do it, her voice reminded him, "You've already survived worse." Then one cold March morning, surrounded by nothing but breath and hope, Noah stood. Not with help, not for show, but truly on his own 2 feet. Maya's hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled freely. Every step he took toward her was a defiance of odds, of gravity, of everything he had once accepted as final. "You did it," she whispered. He reached for her hand. "We did." By summer, the cabin had become a home. The nursery was painted soft cream, with plush giraffes and quotes about courage handwritten above the crib. And in early July, as fireflies blinked through the Vermont woods, twin daughters came into the world, Lila and Juniper, tiny, perfect, swaddled in flannel and love. Lila had Noah's slate blue eyes. Juniper carried Maya's quiet, radiant smile. That first night, Noah held both girls in his arms, heart too full to contain. He looked at Maya, exhausted, glowing, stronger than ever. "We're a family now," he whispered. Maya reached for his hand, "And I've never felt safer." Noah still continued his rehab, not just for himself now, but for Lila, for Juniper, for the garden he dreamed of chasing them through. Some days he stayed home, reading picture books and fluffing pillows. Other days he wrote his memoir, his lessons, his story of falling and rising again. Most afternoons he sat beneath the red maple, the same kind of tree he used to sketch on napkins, before anyone knew his name. Now his name didn't matter, only their names. Lila, Juniper, whispered like prayers as they napped in his lap, sunlight slipping through the leaves. "Our life isn't perfect," he once told Maya, But I wouldn't change a thing. And she smiled. Because sometimes the most beautiful lives grow from the most broken places.